Hello there! In this video, we are building a simple garden bench. A perfect project for beginners wanting to learn and practice some good woodworking techniques and also something that challenge more experienced woodworkers. I mean, can you build this thing in less than an hour? I like this project as a teaching exercise because it really only uses one tool. The main difference is how you use that tool in body mechanics. It does use a few accessories along the way, but this is the main tool we are using. Plus the fact the design is simple enough that students can modify for a lot of different applications when they build some at home. So to get started, let's talk about golf. As a woodworker, I like to think of myself as an average golfer.
Okay guys, if you look in the background of the school, you'll see the place is utterly trashed. Right now it's all packed up, ready for storage, because basically, we're out of business. We hope that instead of just going to waste, we can relocate and reopen in Austin, Texas, where there is a stronger customer base within the enthusiast and homeschool communities. It all depends upon how well we do on our Indiegogo fundraising campaign. This video is basically a Saturday course condensed down to 1 hour by eliminating the exercise time where students would build and I or another teacher would offer one-on-one help. Also, it's a little more wordy because a lot of the instruction is done during that one-on-one time. The shop-made tools you are seeing me use in this video are examples of perks, rewards if you will, you'll find in our Indiegogo campaign and later on in our online store. So if you're interested in helping to preserve a brick-and-mortar school that focuses on homeschool and after-school community while still having classes for the more mature enthusiasts, then please take a look at our Indiegogo fundraiser and help spread the word. Also, if you'd like more videos like this, subscribe. If we can get to 10,000 subscribers, we might qualify for a YouTube program that could also help the brick-and-mortar school.
You've been watching me begin to break down the stock I'm going to be using in this project. It's just basic 2x12 material. I think this was a 16-foot board that I spent maybe 20 bucks from a big box store. Nothing special. But all lumber from those places is not the same. I tried to look for as straight a grain lumber as I could find with as few blemishes as possible, big empty knots and stuff like that. Now, you're generally never going to find a totally cleared board, so one or two you can cut around. No big deal. Just look for the best possible quality you can find. I also like to try and find stuff as close to the center of the tree as possible without getting the pith. Key, without getting the pith. What that results in is the grain direction on both ends of the board is almost quarter sawn, straight across this way, yet the grain direction in the middle is almost flat sawn. This board will warp more than any board in the stack, simply because this flat sawn section the grain is going to want to try and straighten out, thus raising both ends of the board. But when we split this board for this project, all of a sudden the majority of the grain is quarter sawn. So this very unstable board becomes one of the most stablest ones in the stack. It's just we are only going to be using half of it for most of these projects. Now these are just basic 90-degree cuts so far. So I was just using a traditional English layout square that we make here at the school to mark the lines and a cheap Stanley sharp tooth saw. I think they're about 20 bucks. The teeth are hardened so they stay sharp for a pretty good long time. But this is a disposable tool. Once it gets dull, you can't really resharpen it. And because of the way they harden it, the steel back here becomes a little bit softer, so you really can't reuse it for scrapers or stuff that much. It's basically disposable, but this whole saw is less than a replacement blade for a Japanese saw, and this is my rough cutting tool most of the time. Now, if you don't have one of these fancy layout squares or a tri-square or anything like that, there's a simple solution. Just use cardboard.
Those fancy English squares or even one of those metal L framing squares are nice, but if you don't have one, you can always make one using a box. Just cut off one of the flaps. You'd be surprised how accurate a 90-degree square they make. Later on, we might need a 45-degree tool. So to make one, just measure out an equal distance from the 90-degree angle, then connect the dots and make the cut. A right triangle with equal sides will result in a 45-degree angle because it divides it in half. You can use the same technique for any other angle you want to repeat in our project. Cardboard is more than strong enough for use with a pencil in this project.
So let's get back to golf. As a woodworker, I think I am an average golfer. I've walked the grounds a few times, losing balls along the way, and have drunk a few beers at the driving range, which makes me expert enough to talk about golf in this woodworking video. If we don't count the electric carts that most golfers have, there are 3 tools in their arsenal that fall within the spectrum of power and accuracy. These tools can be anywhere within this spectrum, but they can't be in both spots at the same time. They have their drivers, irons, and putters. The drivers are all about power. Seriously, these guys get up in the box and tee off their drivers, whacking as hard as they possibly could to get them as far down the fairway as possible. And as long as it lands somewhere in this football field wide fairway, they're happy as long as it's way down there. And even Tiger Woods, arguably the best golfer out there, sometimes gets in the rough, meaning he missed a football field wide fairway. These tools are all about power. Then you have your drivers. Drivers sacrifice a little bit of power for accuracy. And these are I'm talking about irons. You have your irons. And these are the tools they use a lot of times on the fairway to either get to a better spot on the fairway or to actually shoot it up on the green as close to that pin as possible. And finally, you have your putters. Putters are all about accuracy. They're used to get that perfect trajectory around so that you can sink that little golf ball into a 4-inch cup. They are all about accuracy, no power needed whatsoever. Now, you may have never swung a golf ball or played golf yourself, but I'm sure you've seen movies or America's Funny Home Video gag reels of people playing golf. You can picture it, Tiger Woods picking up his driver, his strongest club, going the farthest distance. He walks up to the tee-off green. He eyes the finish line way down there. The hole he's got to get the ball in. He's got the whole fairway. He grips it. He gets in the right tension, making sure his ankles are at the right angle to use the earth as a fulcrum to maximize his strike on the ball. He takes a massive wind up, every muscle flexed, every tendon and tension. He swings through, strikes that ball with everything he's got. Boom. 4! Now compare that to him hitting a ball that's already on the green or in a sand trap. He's going to be using an iron, a fairway iron, something, a 3 to 7. He comes up. His back swing is not going to be as intense. He's not going to be using all the power he has. Finesse enters into the equation because now accuracy is important. So you might see him take a little half swing. Boom. 4! Now he's made it up on the green, and power is the least of his concern. It's all about getting that exact vector. So what's he do? He walks up to the putting green. He positions his feet. He steps back a few feet, locks his shoulders in, locks his arms in, moves his entire torso and not his wrist. That's too finicky. You want to lock everything in to make a very consistent strike through. Locks everything in, just punch it through, hoping that it goes to the ball, it goes around the green, it's direct. 4! Now there's a lot in woodworking that can kind of be divided up like we play golf. You have your drivers, your irons, and your putters. You have strength, power, and accuracy, and pure accuracy. And in the woodworking realm, I would actually add in a third area called cosmetics. So let's do a quick Venn diagram to discuss this out. Yeah, we're returning to school, but this is an easy way to explain it. You have 3 circles, each of them overlapping a little bit. We have our speed of work. We have our accuracy. And I'm going to say looks over here. Okay? Now, is there anything in woodworking where speed is most important? My thinking is milling. Milling up lumber, whether it's from when you're cutting down the tree in the forest and getting those initial boards to put into the kiln, speed is utmost. To us in our own home shops, just milling up lumber before we make a piece of furniture. We prioritize speed over that. And a lot of times nowadays we use machinery to compensate for it, but in the old days when somebody was working on a handsaw or something like that and they were just doing milling, you looked at their body mechanics. They were using their entire body, from their toes, calves, legs, buttocks, abs, shoulders, everything was going into those cuts. Accuracy be damned. If they were within a quarter of an inch on the line, they were happy. We are the same way today. Now, think about stuff where accuracy is most important. I'm thinking stuff like joinery. I want to get that tenon within 128th or 1,000th of an inch of the size it should be. But I also want to get it done fairly quickly, and I'm not really concerned with the looks, because if there's a little tear out on a tenon, which is inside a mortise inside the board, none of my customers are going to have X-ray vision. Superman's never coming to me, so I don't really care. It's just got to be accurate. Can you think of jobs in the woodworking realm where accuracy and speed are important? My thinking, trim work in a home would be right in between those. They want to get that job done fast. But if you see a gap in that crown molding, you aren't going to pay them. They're going to have to come back and redo the work. Where there are jobs in the woodworking realm where it's all about accuracy besides milling, I would put carpentry close to accuracy, but fully within the realm of speed. Think about putting up a wall in your house. If they're within a quarter or eighth of an inch, that's a good job. Okay? They're even in $1 million homes. You're not going to have a totally flat wall. Is there any jobs in woodworking where it's all about the looks and speed and accuracy don't really matter? Well, I'm thinking carving, sculptures. Now, those guys, they're strictly pretty much using hand tools. Even today, you might get some people using power carvers to rough it out, but in the end, they're getting the details with their hand tools. It's all about how it looks. If an eyebrow is a millimeter off, who really cares? Who's really going to notice? Now, there are people that work within the realm of both the accuracy and looks. I'm thinking finishers. They fit in right there. Yes, they want to get it accurate. They want to get the colors right. But it's all about the looks. If they are a little bit slow, maybe the painting of the house takes a day or two longer, but it looks right and it's the correct color, that's a priority there. Now, think about the body mechanics and tools these people use. All of these guys are going to use pretty much the same tools. Hand saws, chisels, power tools, table saws, that kind of stuff. But they all use them differently. And the body mechanics of the hand tools, the example we're doing today, change in each realm. When you're looking for speed, you're using every single muscle in your body to get that job done. When you're looking for speed and accuracy, you modify your body position. So let's think about that today. Also, well, here's another way to think about it. You could give me the best set of golf clubs in the world, the most expensive, all the doodads in the world, and then you could turn around and give Tiger Woods an 80-year-old rusty 5-iron. Who do you think's still going to win that golf match? He's going to blow me away. He has mastered the body mechanics to make even that horrible tool work to its peak. Where me, I'm just an overweight, out-of-shape guy drinking beer on the golf course, swinging away, that doesn't really know what they're doing. So when you're learning woodworking, concentrate on the body mechanics almost as much as concentrate on the tools. We're using one main tool today, and we're going to use that one tool in 3 different realms, and we're going to change our body mechanics in its use to make it do other things. So now let's get back to breaking down this stock. We are in the realm of carpentry, so speed is important. I've got to get through 11 inches of wood here with just a handsaw, and I don't want to spend all day doing it, okay? But I'm trying to cut these parts fairly accurate. So what I've done is I've got my top, the seat, and the 2 sides already cut out, but I still have to rip them I've got them cross-cut, and now I'm going to cut out the legs. I want them to be about 18 inches. I'm actually going to cut it 19 inches because we're going to put them at an angle. I come over here, I mark my 90 degrees. And I want to get this done fast, so I'm going to be using a lot of my upper body, but I want it to be accurate. I don't want to have to come back and recut these. This is a carpentry project. This is going to be the final cut if I can handle it, if I can work it. So what do? I position my shoulder right over my line. I make sure my elbow, my wrist can all move in line with this line. I line everything up. I lock my bottom foot down at 90 degrees to it. I turn my shoulders to 45. I place my entire upper body, my eyes, wrist, elbow, shoulder, all in line. I draw back to start the line cuts. Draw back a couple times if you need to. I nibble my way a little bit to get that saw line cut. And then, not moving my lower body to keep everything accurate, I'm going to place one hand on top so that I can press down a little bit. I can add some down force as I need to. And generally, I start cutting. Try and keep everything lined up. And once you get going, the blade will keep it fairly straight. And to explain what I'm feeling, right now I'm just pressing down with no downward pressure on this hand. As I come down to the more power section where there's less metal here, I start to press down and add pressure so that the power stroke comes here to here. On the beginning I focus on accuracy, on the back I focus on power. Use the whole blade, upper body strength. And I am not the strongest person in the world. I am not in very good shape. But that doesn't take too long at all to finish cutting. There we go. So what we have here are the two legs. And guys, don't worry if you're a little bit off of 90 degrees or maybe these aren't perfectly plumb. Again, this is a carpentry work. We are getting accuracy as you can, just getting the work done. So we have our two legs right here. And we cut across basically 11 inches. This is a 2x12. They're really about 11.5 inches wide. And we worked on accuracy, but most importantly, speed. And these are going to make the two legs of our workbench. Now we need to take these two pieces, the side and the top, and rip them in half to make the two sides and the top of this right here. Now this is not 11 inches. I believe this bottom one is 28 or 29 inches and the top is 32 inches. So this top section, all we are working around is getting it done as fast as possible. If we are within a 1/4 inch of splitting in half, we are happy, okay? And especially, we are using the same tool. Previously, cutting across 11 inches, it was speed and accuracy. So that was like using an iron on a golf course. Now we're picking it up and we're going to use it as a driver. So let's look at a couple different ways we can go about ripping these boards in half. But first, I'm going to strike a line right down the middle. So I'm going to go about 5.5 inches, actually 5 and 5/8, 5 and 5/8, and strike a line using the same cheap $3 yardstick I started out with at the beginning of this project. Okay, in the hand tool realm, when you're doing some log rips, and this is actually a pretty average piece that somebody would be ripping. It's about the size of a chair leg or something like that. You have to rip off a section. But you can jump down a rabbit hole in either the power tools or hand tools where people will tell you you just can't do something because you don't have the right tool. Well, I'm telling you this. Everybody will tell you this is the wrong tool to use to rip a long board or a medium board like this. This sharp tooth Stanley $20 saw I bought at a big box store is decidedly designed for cross cuts. meaning it goes across the grain. This is almost a Japanese tooth pattern for crosscut, hard to anodized. It should not, according to the blogs or the experts, be able to do long rip cuts. And honestly, if you have a dedicated saw for making rip cuts, it will probably be easier and faster. But you also have to buy another tool. And if you're just getting into woodworking, you don't know about it. It would be better for you to practice with the wrong tool and learn good body mechanics, good tool usage. You will be more effective than having the right tool and poor usage. Okay? Also, the teeth on this one are way too fine. This is basically a 6/4 rough board, grain wood. If you're buying from a big box store, it's probably still wet. This saw should just bind up big time. We're still going to use it to make this cut. Okay? Now, you read a lot on using saw benches. Here's a basic saw bench. It's kind of our bench that we're building is a little bit more complicated than this one. But the idea is you just put it off the side, put your cut line off the side, use your knee to hold it as a clamp, pizza power clamp, draw back, and start cutting, following that line, making your eye, your dominant eye, fall straight down the saw blade, your wrist, your elbow, your shoulder, all in line, and then just come on through. Now I want you to notice something. How many muscles am I using? I got my biceps, my triceps, my pecs a little bit, my back a lot, but not much else. To put any kind of down force down, I either have to twist my wrist or put it at an angle and push my hand down, hoping gravity will cause the teeth to bite. That's why I'm doing it at 45 degrees. This is going to take me a while. This is more of an accuracy stroke. A little bit of speed, but more accuracy. It's just going to take a long time. The other way to do this is the French way. A lot of saw benches have a gap down the middle, and the French like to sit down on the job. So what they'll do is they'll come forward, sit on the bench, and using both hands, that way you can use both arm strengths to come through. This is a little bit faster, but I notice I can't really use a whole saw blade because I'm hitting ground. But it is faster because I can put more muscle into it. I'm giving about 1/4 inch of stroke as I come through. And you just move forward on the seat the farther back you go. But once again, is this using the most power I can? Let me show you my way, the way I prefer to make long rip cuts. Now, I do a lot of woodworking. This started out as a hobby for me, and I really enjoyed it, so I built me a good bench. A bench is just a big old heavy clamp, okay? By the way, I do have 2 of these for sale, because we're having to downsize when we move. I can put this in my leg vise and clamp it up. Now hold it. That frees my body from having to worry about having to hold the bench. I can put it down to a little bit lower if I want to. Just clamp it down. Now, all my body can move to make this cut. I can use the power of my legs, my calves, my toes, my abs, these big old glutes I have in the back that probably mainly are pizza, not muscle. I can put all that into the stroke to speed this up. And this is how I like doing saw cuts. So I come down here. Now I'm giving about a 1/2 inch a stroke. Just powering way through it. Hand on top of the saw, pressing down, using my legs to force it through. You notice I'm at a slight angle. I'm not coming straight through. That way, as I push through, the teeth are having to bite hard. Also, I'm not going straight across the end grain. I'm using as much technique as I can to just get through this board. Rip it in half. Half through, I'll flip it over and come back the other way. We'll just raise it up a little higher. Now this is the downside of using a bench. I do have to constantly reload the wood, but it also gives me a little chance to rest. So here we go. From here to here is about a quarter through this 3-foot board. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14 strokes to go about a foot. Again, this is the wrong tool, but now I'm using good body mechanics. Well, I can just see it now. There are those that go out there, they're going to say, well, gee, Sean, I don't have a big, nice, fancy bench, or I haven't built one you made, or I can't afford one. Well, no excuse. I'm going to show you an even cheaper, practically free way of making a nice, long, round clamp and being able to stand up and using your entire body to do it. And what's even better is you don't have to reposition it in a clamp. You can just start at the top and cut all the way through to the bottom. No pausing whatsoever. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this is push button easy. I have a feeling a lot of the power tools out there in home woodworking shops are there just because people don't want to sweat. They don't want to work a little bit. This is not hard work. It takes you maybe a minute of cardiovascular workout to get through a board this size. I don't want to go out lazy, but man, have we gotten spoiled if a minute of labor is too much for a hobby we love. Plus the fact, $20. So here you go. The practically free way of making a long rib clamp. Assuming you have a few clamps. These are cheap, cheap clamps. I'm sure you can find a pole somewhere, a gazebo, the door of your garage, somewhere where you can just clamp a board up to the wall. Make sure that you have enough clearance on the side for your saw curve to run in. It's a great way. I'm going to rip this up a little bit. But I do want you to notice, I do have power tools. I'm not opposed to power tools. If you have the money, they're a good investment and they do speed up milling. But if you're just getting started out, or if this is just a hobby, why take the time to pull out something like that, set it up, grab your dust collector, when it only takes you about a minute to cut the work, and you'll get the slightest of workout. Seriously, you don't get a figure like mine by doing a lot of heavy workout. Why would I want to eliminate just a little bit of work? Okay, so here we go. I have it up here. I got it about shoulder height. So I want to keep my spine straight. I'm going to get the saw cut started using my accuracy. I got my thumb next to it, just nibbling it to get it started, to get the curve started. We are talking accuracy here. You'll notice in a second I let go of the board and I bring that board on top of the saw so I can start pressing down. I start back here, there's very low pressure. As I come through, I start getting more and more pressure down. I found out if I put a lot of pressure down here, I tend to bend the saw, okay? And then I'm going to start using my legs, my hip. I'm anchoring against the ground to push forward to get the most power I can into it. And as I get lower and lower and lower, you see me spread my legs down apart to lower down because I don't want to bend over. I want to keep my spine straight, use my muscles. Use the body the way it's been intended to be used. And here we go. I see it close up. To me, this would be almost dangerous to do on a table saw because it will bind on the blade, even with a rising knife. Look at that. How long have I been working? Halfway through. And remember, this is the wrong saw for this operation. A cross cut, y'all, should not be able to rip cut. You can see it binding up there. If I was on a table saw, that would start pinching on my blade. It might kick back on me. It's binding up. The wood was really wet. So it wasn't wet, I could go straight through. I'm going to reverse it and come down from the top. But even repositioning. How long is this really taking? Yes, I'm a little bit winded, but you got to expect that. Here we go. Starting at the top, lining up my line, and having at it. Person. This is just me using my whole body to get work done. There you go. Maybe a minute of continuous work, no big deal. So, now we got our 2 legs, our 2 stretchers, and our 2 seats. We're going to start working on the joinery, so let's set the seat boards to the side. We'll set the legs to the side. And we will work on just the stretchers right now. What we're going to be wanting to do is create 2 slots in these for the legs to fit into. That way, when we sit down and all the weight goes down, those legs won't want to splay apart. They'll be fitting in here and wedged in. Going across the grain like this, interior of the wood, as Jerry called it, dado. And this is a little bit more precise cut, so instead of changing tools, the preferred tool for doing this kind of cut would be something like a back saw, a carcass saw, something like this. Instead, we're going to be using the same $20 saw, but instead we are going to change our body mechanics and our techniques to make a more precise cut. So right here we have our 2 stretchers, the pieces that are going to go across. Basically it's going to work like this and the legs are going to go down the middle. You can see it's from the same board so that we divide it in half so they're roughly the same size. I am not going to worry about smoothing these or smoothing up my saw cuts at this moment. We'll save that for later. Might as well do all the same tasks at the same time. And remember, this is a construction project, so we aren't working for ultimate precision here. It's just going to be sitting out in the garden. Now, I want y'all to look at the grain patterns of these boards, okay? Let me see right there. See how the grain is coming this way on this one, that way on that one. Well, grain as it dries is going to want to straighten out. So this board is actually going to cup a little bit over time like that. If I were to have this board set up like this so that this was the inside of the legs, eventually I would have only 1 contact point in the middle because it will be bowed. I would rather have 2 contact points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse these like this. So that as both of these warp, the grains tend to straight out, I will end up with 2 contact points with the legs that will be going down in the middle. Okay? So what I've done is I've labeled each of these with a top and the inside sections right here. Inside. Next up, I got to figure out how I want to do the legs. And basically, on these, the legs are going to be splaying out from the top to the bottom. Kind of like that. Now, it doesn't matter what angle you pick. If you want to, you can have them straight up and down. I just think that looks very boring. You don't want to be the legs obviously going way out to the side either. So what I did when I was making these was I kind of figured out what looked right, and I kind of picked the angle so that the legs didn't go out farther than the stretcher. So I just kind of did this action, figured out where I wanted it to be. What I found out is the angle I picked is about 1 7. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you're using an angle gauge like this, where it adjusts, and these are fairly cheap, you can find them all over the place, 1 7 would be coming 1 inch over, 7 inches up. So basically you just kind of put the bottom point right here about 1 inch over and point it at the 7 degrees. And the reason why is you want to use some kind of jig, whether it be just a piece of cardboard cut at the angle you like, or something like this, is you want consistency. So as you can see, it's now pointing at 7 and comes 1 inch over, so that's about 1 7 degrees. Luckily for me,
these little dovetail markers that I use all the time because they have a 90-degree reference here, and then I prefer a 1 in 7. It just looks right to me. Well, they are about the exact diameter. So instead of using this, you're going to see me reference this little piece of wood right here called it's a classic dovetail marker. I made a video on how to make these on my Dovetail Demystified. They work just fine, and this is one of the perks in our campaign. If you're interested, we sell them online. So I have laid out I figured out the angle I like, and now I'm going to kind of figure out the position of it. And in my mind, coming in about 5.5 inches for the legs to start and splaying them out from the top to the bottom, seems about right. Now here's a trick though. We have to get these cut exactly the same on both boards, otherwise the legs will be kind of cockeyed in the frame and they won't work as well. Well, let's cheat a little bit. I basically got them. They're both the same width. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in about 5.5 inches on one board, and I'm going to mark them both at the same time, straight across the top. And I'll come in 5.5 inches this way. And if the boards are a little bit different sized, it doesn't really matter, just as long as the center diameter, center position of both of these is exactly the same. And if you mark them at the same time, they can't be anything but exactly the same. Okay? So here we go. Let's mark them out. Now, if you don't have your angles or anything set up, an easy way to do it would be to flip them over on the bottom side, and instead of coming over 5 inches, maybe come over 3 inches. Mark your line on both sides. And that way, when you connect the top and bottom on both legs, they will all be the same angle. Everything will work out just fine. Instead, I have my little marking gauge, so I'm going to make it easy on myself. And I'm going to mark one line at the angle I like. 1, 2, 3. Do the same to the other side. And because I'm going to be using the same gauge, the same little tool to figure out my angles, everything will line up. But if you are a little bit off, it doesn't really matter that much. This is just a practice piece. Okay, now I'm going to do the same to the other side. So now we've gotten our angles laid out for our legs. I went over my pencil line and marker just so you could see a little bit better in the video. I don't generally like using marker, but it wasn't showing up. Now we need to figure out how to make the width of this mark so that we can cut out the section for these boards to slide into perfectly sized. Now you can do a lot of measurement, but I'm about to show you the trick I'm going to use because this is a carpentry project. I just lined one board up. Remember, this entire project we are making out of the same 2x12. I'm going to use a pencil because it's got a conical straight shape, so I can actually come in and rest that pencil angle right on the edge and come straight down and mark my angle. And if I do that on the inside of all the boards, I know all my legs will line up perfectly. And I'll be perfectly happy. Okay, come over to this one and do the same thing with the other board. Simple, sweet, to the point. Okay, now let's cut them out. Oh, one more thing. You also need to mark the depth. I'm going to mark it down about 1/3 of the way. Roughly 1/2 inch because these are 1.5 inch boards. Now this cut would traditionally be done with a back saw, something with a good solid back to it. It'll give you more precision. This is a cross-cut carcass saw, and when you do these kinds of cuts, you would basically line up the saw blade, get it started, nibble your way to get the saw blade started. But notice my blade, my eye, my wrist, my shoulder, everything is in line. My shoulders are at 45 degrees to the cut. My feet are spread apart. My front foot is pointing the way of the cut. The back foot is perpendicular. My whole body is lined up, anchored
to isolate this arm movement for ultimate precision. So I would start over here, I would nibble my way back down, okay? Well, we're not going to use a back saw. We're sticking with our inexpensive carcass saw, okay? But just like Tiger Woods putting with a 7-iron, we're going to use the same technique, same body position. Front foot facing forward, shoulders at 45 degrees. My eye, finger, wrist, elbow, shoulder all lined up. I might be a little bit farther back so that I can use the toe of the saw to get started. My thumb is acting as a fence, and I will once again gently nibble, nibble, nibble. I'm nibbling so I can follow the line. And as I get going farther, I take longer strokes and longer strokes, lining it up, using my thumb to come back to anchor the saw blade against the line. And then once you've got that saw curve all the way back, you can begin taking longer strokes. But once again, notice my shoulders are still. I am using my arm. I'm using precision techniques, even though I have the wrong tool. But the result with that tool will be a lot more precise. And just stop when I reach my line. Notice you can still see the black line here. I stayed right next to the line, just like you do in all your saw cuts. So I'll repeat it again on this side using the pencil line, if you can see that. Okay, I'm using my thumb. Now, I do make a variation. Whenever I'm normally doing dovetails and stuff like that, I'll actually hook my finger a little bit because the teeth are smaller with a smaller set. But because it's on a thumb, I actually have my thumb up off the board a little bit. But it is still there because I can guide the saw plate with my thumb. And I'm going to take very controlled, even nibbling it across, very light cuts, very light pressure on the saw. I'm actually lifting a little bit, and I move my thumb back to position the saw plate next to that line. Occasionally blowing off the sawdust so I can see the line. And once I've got a good saw line going, a saw curve, I will extend out my saw cut. Makes a nice, smooth cut. This is not a power stroke. I'm just letting the weight of the saw do the work. And when I get to my baseline, I stop. Once again, and I'm going to make this cut just to break up the fibers in the middle. Start it, work your way back, keep it sawing, keep the saw moving, very light. See, the proper technique, even with the wrong tool, can result in good results. Okay, now that we've got those cuts made, now we need to clear out the waste. Now, I want y'all to take a look at something. We're just going to be using a simple chisel. I think this one's a 1 inch or it doesn't really matter. ½ inch up to 1 inch, however big you want, doesn't matter. But I want you to pay attention to something. Look at the end of the board and look at the grain pattern. You see these growth rings. They're kind of arcing around in a circle around this point, coming around this way. Well, when we start chipping the wood out, if we come in this way, notice the grain, we're actually leveraging it up. We actually want to do most of our cutout coming this way so that we are laying those fibers down so we'll get a smoother cut. So in actuality, what I will do is I will start coming in this way, and I only come in a little bit of the time. And then I'll clear out the rest of the wood coming back this way, so I'm going with the grain as I cut it off. So here we go, and I'll try and figure out how to do this without staying out of the camera's angle. So what I'm going to do, here's my baseline. I'm going to come up about halfway. This is going against the grain. I have my bevel up. I come up about halfway, and I give it a few taps with my mallet. And you can see it's chipping off, it's breaking, it's not really splitting. I'll go about halfway to the line again, a few taps, halfway to the line again,
And actually right this time I'm pretty much right on the line. And then I will kind of use hand pressure to pare off as much as I possible. And I'm just kind of eyeballing flat here. Then I'm going to come over here, go halfway. I like to get down low on my knees and just bang it off. Come about halfway again. When I only have maybe 1/8 of an inch to go, that's when I put my mallet down and I start using hand pressure. I'll start at this angle and I'll angle my way up so I get a little ramp on this side. And then I just start, I got my thumb on this side, pressing down. I'm just kind of taking off the tops of all these little parts. Just light pressure forward. Just shaving it down, and if it's a little rough, I don't really care that much. All I'm trying to do is get it a little flat. Sometimes, since it won't stretch all the way across, I'll turn the bevel down, I'll ride that bevel. And if you lift up a little bit, it kind of ramps it up, and then you can change the angle. The only thing you just don't want to do is blow out the other side. And now I'm eyeballing it. And there we go. We cleared it out, and it's flat enough for a carpentry project. Now do that to all the other sides. Now your work doesn't have to be super tight doing this. It doesn't have to be very precise at all. It can be loose. But it's kind of fun if you want to test it out. Let's see how we did. Take one board, you drop it in. And if it holds its own weight, that's a pretty good joint. You're going to have good glue fit there. And it just takes a little practice, maybe a little mallet pressure, but that's okay. A little loose, but it'll work. Okay, next up, we are going to make a little dovetail on these that will help these stretchers transfer our weight from the top of the seat, through the legs, and into the ground. Okay? So the leg's coming down this way. We want some way to lock this in so that the leg will be flush here and it'll stay in without having to depend upon screws and stuff like that. So we're going to add a little dovetail on this side right here. And just to make the math easy, we're going to do it at 45 degrees. So here we go. We have one leg. This is the top. Obviously the leg splays out. So this is the bottom. This is the one we want to put the dovetail on. I'm going to do one of them all the way through, and then you can do the other ones figuring it out. Basically, using my little dovetail marker, I'm going to transfer the 90 degrees across. Dovetail marker and a pencil, no big deal. And remember, if you're a little loose, it doesn't really matter. This is just a construction project. Okay? Now, the board is this way, so the dovetail is going to slide in at an angle. So on the opposite side, I need to make sure I mark at the same angle that the leg is going down. And then just to make the math easy, we're going to do 45 degrees. So I'm just going to use my finger as a fence, come over the same distance, and mark that distance down from the top. So there we go. Now if I connect this corner to this corner, that angle should be 45 degrees. So I'll just drop it into my vise, and going back and using my putting techniques or the fine woodworking techniques, I'm going to take my saw, I'm going to line it up, I'm going to use this finger on this, or my thumb on this side, and I'm going to nibble, 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 until I come over and I'm just about to touching that right there, and then I will come down the face, keeping the saw at about 45 degrees and just following that line. And if there's a little gap there, no big deal. Doing the same thing on this side. Nibble. And making full strokes, coming down the line. And then I'm just going to make some relief cuts in the center just to get rid of some, to break up some fibers. Just
Just making sure I stop before I hit either this far edge over here or the baseline. And the more of these you do, the easier the next step will be. Okay, my saw teeth are on this corner and they're just about that line. So now I'm going to take a chisel and my mallet, and starting about halfway up, holding the chisel at 45 degrees, just tap it off. You can see they just kind of break off. Easy peasy. Then when you start getting towards the baseline, because you haven't severed those fibers, you can go at it with just hand pressure. Basically just pare away until the saw marks are gone, or almost gone, and you'll have your 45 degrees. Do that to the other 4 corners, and then we'll put the dovetail on the legs themselves. So now that you got all 4 corners dovetailed, let's do a little pre-assembly so that we can mark out the part of the legs that we need cut out so that they will slide in these grooves. Now, pick up your legs that you cut out earlier, and here's where you want to look at them. Figure out which way you want the grain to go. Me personally, I like the grain to to have the center of the tree on the outside so that if it warps, it bows to the outside a little bit. So the center of the tree is on the outsides of mine. And I try to get it so that either the cathedrals are going up or down, but they're both equal on both sides. Okay? So there we go. I got my 2 legs. I got my 2 sides. And you can see how it'll go together. Let's see if we can get a rough fit. Okay, so here we are. I got it kind of clamped up so you can see what it's going to look like. It's upside down. These are the stretchers. And we want these sides to fit within this realm. So in a second, we're going to cut rip a spot on it. But I want to make sure that I get the base at the right angle. Now, I could use my little angle gauge like this. But if you don't have something fancy like that, or you've lost the reference that you were using earlier to set the angles, here's an easy way I will do it. I'll just find something fairly thick. I'm using my biggest mistake eraser, and this is just a consistent thickness. And I'm going to mark it down. This is because I want these legs to fit down a little bit farther into the little groove. So there we go. There's going to be my base, and I'll just mark this all the way around. So now I have a consistent depth to go to on all my legs. So as you can see, the tenons only come in so far. So now we need to cut out a portion of this that equals this distance. So basically, I'm just going to take my little finger gauge. I'm going to come along, and I will mark along the edges up until that cross-cut line that I did earlier. So here we are. I have my baseline of the cut right here, and that's what we use by putting the stretcher in there and marking directly off the stretcher using the eraser as a gapper. Then I measured this distance right here, what's left over in the board minus the dado, and we marked along here. Now I need to create a corresponding 45 degrees right here for that first board to fit into. And if you don't have a speed square or anything like that, which are great and wonderful, they're cheap, I'd suggest you're going to want one anyways. But if you don't have one, you can use, something like that little angle gauge that we've got right here, and just mark 90 degrees, and then take this distance right here, whatever it is, bring it over this way, and that should give you 45. So that right there is roughly, 1 inch. So if I come 1 inch down, I've basically made an acute angle, a 90-degree angle right there. So connecting those 2 dots will give me 45 degrees. So I now just need to cut out all that right there. Okay, so here's how I would make that cut. I'm going to use my vise because I have it, but you can use clamps on a bench or anything like that. This would probably be another good use for using one of those poles. We have an angle on the top and then the 45 degrees. So, and this really is the domain of something like a back saw. You'll get a little bit more control and it's easier to use. But if you don't have one and you still want to make some good joinery, you can use, once again, the cheap saw. It all comes down to technique. I've got my front foot facing forward, my back foot facing sideways. I'm going to angle my shoulders about 45 degrees to the cut. I've got this hand right here aiming the tip. I can aim the tip right there. I'm going to nibble my way across the top, following that slight angle of the line. It's about 1 in 7. And again, if I'm a little bit off, I don't really care. There we go. Come down. Now, I will say this. We are doing a 45 degrees, and it's kind of hard to get that 45 degrees in. So once I make that first cut, what a lot of times I will do is I will come back and saw a little ways the other direction just to get rid of some wood. And then come straight down. And it just basically clears out a little trench for me to get my saw into. And then there we go. I'm going to nibble my way, drawing back, nibble. Once I get my angle going, saw down to the line. Now I'm doing this cross cut first so that when I rip it doesn't split on me. There we go. Here, it's just a straight rip cut. Start from the top, work my way down. And now, I'm not cutting just an inch over. I'm cutting a good, probably foot. So I'm going to start on my line, get it going using my accuracy techniques of just using my arm, nibbling, get it going. Grain's running kind of weird on me. Let's start on the other side this time. Nibble, get it going at 90 degrees. Notice I'm just using my arm, my shoulders are locked. Once I get the pass started, I start putting a little bit more down pressure, then the hand comes on top. Now we are using our entire body. We just want to get this part done. Get her done. Hear the sound change? As it comes down to the end of the cut, tell the difference. And this will be the time I'd also come in, because it's such a rough tool, I would use my chisel just to clean it up. Which just isn't too bad. No need. There you go. Do the other 4, or the other 3, and we'll come back. Okay, now that you've got all that done, we're actually getting to the point where we can start assembling. But to make life easier on you later down the road, now would be the time to smooth out these 2 leg parts. You can use sandpaper, electric sand or what. I'm just going to use a block plane because I find it's faster. It gives me a little bit better finish. But you can do whatever you want. But I suggest you go ahead and take this time to smooth out the 2 faces. Don't worry about the edges or the ends, just the 2 faces. Because getting in and sanding this interior part after it's all assembled is a bit of a pain. looking, halfway decent. This is just something that's going out in the yard. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now let's turn our attention to the stretchers. And now all we're doing is cosmetics. So if you want to skip all this stuff, you can. But when I look at these, I kind of like having instead of having a straight up and down, I kind of like having an angle that kind of corresponds next to the legs angle. So if the leg is coming down like this, I want equal angle this way. So I'm just going to use that same little marking gauge, and I'll just come over the width of the gauge and make a line. I'm going to cut those off, and then I'll smooth out the faces just like I did on the other side. And then we'll get to starting to assemble stuff. Okay, so after you got it all smoothed out the way you like, let's begin assembling it. I think it'll be pretty self-evident how this thing's going to go together. And if everything isn't flush, don't worry about it. We can flush it up at the end with either sandpaper or plane or chisel or even the saw. No big deal. Okay, your assembly work. And what do I mean by flush? I mean, like none of mine are perfect. This little section right here, there's even some gaps in there. No big deal, but this little stool is already getting pretty solid. Now at this point, you could drive nails in, you could screw it, you could glue it, whatever. I'm going to show you the way I've been doing it using dowels. So there's no metal in this whole bench. Okay, first off, I'm going to spray a little glue in these dados. Not much, but glue's cheap, can't hurt. No big deal. I'm using Titebond too, because this is probably going to go outside and I'll probably forget about it. Get all rained on. And Titebond is supposedly water resistant. Titebond 2 is water resistant but not waterproof. I'll do that to both sides and then put a clamp on it. Okay, I just put glue on all 4 dados. I put some clamps on them. I'm not even sure that glue does much, but it's Titebond 2 and this is going outside. I've got a 3/8 inch drill bit, and I'm going to be using just store-bought 3/8 dowel. Okay, now I've got dovetails right here that are going down at 45 degrees. So I want you to notice the first thing I do, I put a dowel right here, and look at the angle I'm doing it on. I'm going up, counteracting that dovetail. So these two are going to pinch together so that this board cannot move. Then on the top, I'm going to come down about the same amount. This time, I'm going to go down. So not only is this board dovetailed onto the top, dovetailed into the leg, but the pegs themselves are dovetailed. Now I want you to notice one other thing. I'm going to put one dowel right here. Here's your question of the week. Why am I doing this? Put it in the comments down below. Okay, so now I'm going to drop a little glue in those holes. I'm not being too delicate here. Okay, and then on this, I'm going to put this dowel in first because that hole is draining down. So just drive it in. Make sure it goes into this board. Drive it far enough in. You can hear it, it's hit that board, so give it a few more whacks. Until it bottoms out, and then just cut it off. You can use a chisel, saw. I just happen to have a flush cut saw. You can do anything. And then fill in the other two. Just exactly the same. Once you got those dowels in, you can pretty much take the clamps off because we're pretty much done with them. Now's the time to flush up the top so we can put the seat on. Easiest way I know to do that is I will grab those same clamps and clamp it to my bench. Now if you don't have a bench, you can use a park bench, even that pole we were talking about earlier, just do it sideways, no big deal. And then I'll grab that same cheap old saw and I will run it right along here. Gotta move my bench out a little bit, pardon me. So, just run it flush. I'm holding my hand against it. The idea is I just want to keep it flat against the top rails, and it'll do a pretty good enough straight line. Flip it, do it again. So we got a nice flat base for our top, but you'll notice that it's probably racking if yours is like mine. We cut these by hand. We did the best we could, but there's going to be a little bit of error there. So now we need to level it out. Also, we want to get it to the right height. I like my benches to be about 18 inches tall. This one right now is 17.5 inches, and I still have to add that 1.5 inches up top. So I can basically take 1 inch off the bottom of these. So the idea is you get the top level, wedge it so it's nice and secure, and then you find something, the height that you're going to take off, and you lay it down below. I'm taking off by 1 inch. This is maybe a little bit more than 1 inch. So I'm just going to level mine off, grab me a pencil, and draw a line straight across using my bench, which is flat, as a reference. And that right there will not only give me my angles, but it will also give me the proper height for everything. Do that to both legs, cut to the line, and you will be all set. So as you can see, we've got a pretty sturdy little bench right now, and we're pretty much done. Everything after this is pure cosmetic and just attaching the two top seat stretchers. Now, I like to, at this point, go ahead and sand and flush. If your legs are a little bit proud, now would be the time to flush them up, clean up the faces. That's why I left these faces to the end, because I knew I was probably going to have to flush it up anyways. Now, I don't like having a solid block right here, and this is purely cosmetic, but if you want to, you can set up, cut a little notch out, or some kind of decoration here to create two legs. What I like doing, just to be consistent, is I'll come up this width. So I'll take an off cut from here and set that as a height. Flip it over. Clamp it down. Bisect the middle. Then I use my drill to drill a hole just to terminate my cut. Then I'll use the same angle of the legs and these side stretchers to make my notch. It just means I'm going to use my little gauge again. You can use your little cardboard cutout if you want. Grab something, line it up, draw a line, saw the line, and then that's it. So there you go. All we got left to do is to dress the top and attach it. Maybe 5 minutes of labor. We split this 2x12 earlier, so you want to smooth out your saw cuts. I like to smooth out the top, bottom, sides, and ends, and I'll put a chamfer on everything, and then I'll show you how we attach it to the top. Okay, so here we go. I finished out 3 of the 4 sides. I left the top rough because that's generally the very last thing I do, and I don't handle the ends until the very end also. Now what we got to do is attach these to the top. Now this is entirely up to you. If you want to knock these 2 boards together or just leave the slightest gap, you can have flush sides to the top. Me, I like a little bit of an overhang to create a shadow line. Plus the fact if I misalign stuff, nobody can really tell if I'm slightly off one way or the other. Also, I like to have a handhold down the middle so I can reach in and carry this thing around. Now if you're using this as a saw bench, you might want to think about just having maybe a 1/2 inch gap, just enough for your saw to slide through so when you do French cutting like I demonstrated earlier. Me personally, I like to have the consistent spacing, consistent dimension throughout projects, so these boards are about that thick. I have some offcuts. What I will do is I will slide some offcuts right on the legs, squeeze it together, kind of finger align my gap so it's all even. Finger align my offset from both sides. Now the only thing you really want to look for is to make sure that this gap is consistent. For that reason, whenever I drop dowels into these, the first dowel I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole through the seat top into the stile straight and drop it down, a dowel down straight. That way, if I get these 2 off, one of them off while I'm sinking the rest of it down, I can pivot the other one to make the gap consistent. After I drill this one down, I will drill a couple more at angles. Those angles are going to what locks this top down to the base. Now if you don't want to do that one, there's no reason why you can't just grab nails and screws. Also, I tend to drop a bead of glue along here just for added reinforcement. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed following along on this video, this little project. It really is a great exercise to learn some fundamental skills. And I hope you realize that this whole project, I mainly only used one tool. Just a cheap saw you can get at a big box store. Nothing special here. What I changed was how I use the tool, my body position, how I use where I use the teeth, all that kind of stuff. Techniques that you will use with a lot of other tools to either gain precision or gain speed. This is one of those projects that the first time you build it, it will probably take you 3 hours. The next time it'll probably take you about an hour. And then a lot of y'all can knock them out in about 45 minutes. It's a simple, inexpensive project, and you learn quite a bit, and you get a little bit of a workout if you really go after it. I hope you noticed some of the tools I was using, the shop-made tools. These are all available on our Indiegogo campaign and probably later on our website as we're trying to fund relocating the school, because it's basically shut down right now, to Austin, Texas, so we can serve a larger homeschool after-school community. If you build one of these, please send me a picture. I'd love to see them out there. And I want y'all to remember, it is always worth the effort to learn, create, and share with others. Y'all be safe and have fun.